Welcome to The Pleasure Priority with me, your host, Amber Taylor. This is the podcast focused on putting you first because let's be real, sis, settling just ain't it. So every episode, we're exploring your relationships, aka the ways in which you relate to everything around you so that you can improve your quality of life. Whether it's your relationship with yourself, your family, your friends, a partner, your job, or even how you relate to money, time, your body, whatever. We're diving deep into how you can curate your relationships to get the most joy and fulfillment from life without compromise. So, to my friends ready to prioritize your pleasure and never settle again, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Hey friends, and welcome back. Today, we're diving into a topic that hits close to home for so many of us, especially if you're Black and neurodivergent and navigating a world that expects you to juggle everything like you're a superhero. And I mean, we are, but we don't always have to be. So today's episode is all about executive dysfunction and burnout. You know, that feeling you get when there's a million things to do, but your brain's just like, nah, like not today. Or when you push yourself so hard that you're running on fumes, but you're still trying to keep going. Yeah, we have all been there, but the good news is you don't have to stay there. We're going to talk about how to recognize when you're in that place, and more importantly, how to reclaim control of your time, your energy, and your life. Also, just a quick disclaimer here. This isn't the episode giving you a blanket overview of all the things you've already heard before, but this is the episode on why you need to listen to them. So I'm not about to tell you what a boundary is or more skills to manage your time better. You can revisit some season 1 episodes for that. But what I am going to tell you is why you need to reclaim and fundamentally shift your relationship to executive functioning and the support you actually need with it. Okay, great. Let's get into some depth. definitions. So, executive function is a set of mental processes or skills that support goal-directed behavior. It allows people to plan, focus, and multitask. Executive function is the foundation for so many life skills, including working memory, which is the ability to remember instructions and keep key information in your mind in both verbal and nonverbal ways. Cognitive flexibility, which is the ability to adapt to new situations. Inhibition control, which is the ability to control impulses and suppress inappropriate responses. Emotional control, which is the ability to manage your feelings. Self-awareness, which is the ability to know how you're doing in any given moment. Planning and problem solving, which is the ability to set and meet goals. And organization, which is the ability to keep track of things physically and mentally. So executive function touches on everything and more required to be a functioning adult in today's Western society. So I know y'all are out there just like me, joking about or talking about how hard it is to adult. It's because it's actually incredibly hard, especially if your brain doesn't naturally function executively. It becomes extra work that you have to do just to get to the proverbial starting line because these skills are still just the beginning. Executing them and the work that comes after is a whole nother story. But let's continue with defining executive dysfunction, also known as disordered executive function, which is the verbiage that I'm going to be using for the rest of the episode. But disordered executive function is a disruption to the efficacy of the executive cognitive functions. It's like you know what you need to do, but actually doing it, a whole different story. And that can look like trouble managing your emotions or your impulses, problems with starting, organizing, planning, or completing tasks, trouble listening or paying attention, short term memory issues, inability to multitask or balance tasks, socially inappropriate behavior, the inability to learn from past consequences, difficulty solving problems, and difficulty learning or processing new information. And these are just things that it can look like. You don't have to be deficient in all of these areas to have disordered executive functioning. Usually, we're actually pretty proficient in these areas because we've done the work to be. But it's also thinking about it in a way of like, if I wasn't doing this extra work, if I wasn't making up these games in my head, if I didn't have all these tricks to remembering things, would I still be efficient in these areas? Because again, these are ways of naturally functioning in your brain. But when you have a disordered executive function, it can lead to long term problems like affected performance at work, at school, at home, difficulty forming or maintaining relationships. And these are all types of relationships, not just romantic ones, of course, but also mood issues, low self esteem, avoidance of difficult tasks, low motivation, or loss of interest in activities, etc., etc. So, just from these definitions, we can see how much disordered executive functioning is a disadvantage to the socialized and widely accepted conditioned ways of how we exist as adults in today's society. And that disadvantage comes due mainly in the forms of extra work or ostracization. Then, if you add being a Black human on top of everything else, like, come on now. It can get to the point where it feels like you're drowning, and the best you can do is try to keep your head above water. But barely surviving is not the best that we can do. And band members, aka Black and neurodivergent. So, once again, shout out to Wesley Jackson Wade, aka the Supreme Neck Protector, over on TikTok for that moniker. But band members are incredibly at risk of burnout. And burnout is a state of complete mental and physical and emotional exhaustion. It's when you've pushed and pushed and pushed, and then you get to that point where your body and your mind are done. You can't focus, you're exhausted all the time, and even the things you once loved feel like a chore. And you don't have to reach the level of hospitalization to acknowledge burnout, because by that point, you've been burnt out, boo boo. You've been. And it's gotten to the point where you've traumatized your body into revolting against your incessant demands against it. And just because you're not at the point of hospitalization and you may have found a band aid to prevent you from burning out all the way, that doesn't mean that you found a solution to the actual root problem. For neurodivergent folks, burnout often comes from trying to keep up with neurotypical expectations. And so many of us have defined neurotypical expectations as normalcy. So it gets even harder to recognize what's actually causing the burnout. And that can look like, instead of recognizing that there's too much on our plates, we blame and shame ourselves for not getting it all done. And that's a super vicious cycle because we unknowingly become our own oppressors and end up entirely drained. But it's super important to learn how to spot your burnout flags so you know when you're at risk or on the verge of burnout so you can be more proactive instead of reactive to it. One big red flag for me is when the things I usually enjoy start feeling like work, when it's hard to get out of bed, or when I'm snapping at people for no reason. That's my cue that burnout is lurking and I need to do something about it. And please, if you think you have disordered executive function or if you think you're burnt out or close to it, please go get support. You don't need to do it alone, and you certainly don't need to add anything else to your list to figure out on your own. You are by no means broken, but you can learn how to better understand yourself, your needs, and how to better connect with the world around you. It doesn't have to be this hard, and support can look a lot of different ways. Psychoeducation, occupational therapy, speech therapy, CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, coaching, Eastern medicine, Western medicine, and more. So you've got options. There's no one single right answer. And the first thing you try may not be the right answer or the right thing for you, or maybe even the only thing. A lot of us need more than one, attacks on multiple fronts. Very supportive, very efficient, right? But in the end, the most important thing you can do is get the help that you need. Okay, so we've talked about what disordered executive function and burnout look like, but how do we reclaim control? How do we start moving through that stuck feeling without overwhelming ourselves more? Well, we need to understand what we want and reshape our own definitions of success. We need to establish our own minimum baseline and not the idea of it that society has for us, and then we need to act accordingly. We need to make sure each relationship we work to maintain in our lives is actually beneficial to us. And we need to create boundaries and enforce consequences. So ultimately, we need to vehemently fight for our right to exist as our full selves unapologetically. Anything short of that really isn't going to cut it long term and actually works to harm us instead of help us. But as we begin this journey, one of the hardest things we can start with relearning is how to say no to others, to expectations, and to ourselves. We've been taught to take it all on and not complain, be grateful. But if we don't manage our energy and our expectations, others are going to manage them for us. And trust me, it's not going to be in our best interest. And burnout is not cute. Setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to other people. It's about saying no to yourself when you're overextending. It's about learning to recognize when you're pushing too hard and when you need to take a step back. It's about understanding that rest is required. It's not something that's earned. It's about understanding that joy and pleasure is required. It is not something that's earned. It's about learning how to reject ideals and ways of being that don't actually serve you or that do serve to perpetuate ideas that you wouldn't consciously stand behind. It's about understanding your needs and not accepting anything less than what's required to meet them. Look, reclaiming control of your time and your energy when you're dealing with disordered executive function and the potential of burnout isn't easy, but it is 100% possible. The key is to listen to yourself, set realistic expectations, prioritize your well being, and get help when you need it. But you totally got it. And of course, if you're looking for more support, you know where to find me. Just click the link in my bio and book a call so we can roadmap how we'd work on this together. And you can even take the quiz again, specifically focusing on your relationship to executive function, disordered executive function, burnout, things in that realm. You can take the quiz again, specifically with that in mind, and then get your relationship personality type back for it, which includes your psychoanalytic write up, pain points, motivations, things to work on, and more. So you have a more directed approach on how you can individually work on your relationship to disordered executive function, as well as your relationship with burnout and work after burnout. Because you don't have to settle, and you certainly don't have to settle in burnout, because life gets so much better than that. All right, y'all, that's what I got for you for today's episode of the Pleasure Priority Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who can use this message today. But with that, I'll see you next week. Stay pleased. Bye. Thanks for joining me for this episode of The Pleasure Priority. I hope that when you see things can be better, you're inspired to do better. Because remember, you deserve nothing less than an abundance of joy, fulfillment, and all the peaceful good vibes. If you love this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. Oh, and hey, make sure you're on my email list for more tips, laughs, story times, community, and all things pleasure. So until next time, keep living life on your terms because settling is for the birds. All right, stay pleased, my friends. I'll see you soon.